Good morning and Happy New Year. 2023, it's hard to believe. What is faster than a speeding bullet, stronger than a moving locomotive, and can leap tall buildings with a single bound? Of course, it's Superman. Superman is that childhood hero that stood for justice and could do no wrong. Maybe yours was not Superman, but we've all had some type of hero that we've clung to at times. And in the secret world of our imagination, we've longed to be like that person. And really, I think that same thinking can be applied not just to fictional characters, but to real-life people that we've looked up to at one time or another, or even maybe have raised to that higher level of humanity above where other people are, certainly above where we are at. You know, think back to when you were young and who that person might have been for you. Or if you're still young, who that person may be even now. Maybe it's your father or mother, grandfather, grandmother. Could be an uncle or just a friend. Could be a teacher or maybe an officer somewhere along the line that gave extra time to you. Maybe it's not a person that you know particularly, but maybe someone you've observed on TV or read about in a book. But whoever they are for you, when you think about them, you just kind of, you think about how much you look up to them and almost idolize them, but in a good sense. And maybe they're like that Superman to you. They're good, and they do what is right, and they never do anything wrong, or at least as far as you know. For me, when I was young, it was my old bandmaster, Andrew Stewart. Everyone called him Andy. He was, he was the father-in-law to Major Kathy Stewart, who some of you may know as Kathy Raby, because I believe she was from here, way back. But he was from Scotland, and he was the staunch, strict, disciplined bandmaster for the Kalamazoo Citadel Band. And I remember very well when I joined that band how he drew awe and respect from everyone. And on a few occasions when he would rear his temper, of course with righteous indignation, normally it was because talking in the band or goofing off or not paying attention, and normally it came from the trombone section. No resemblance of our trombone section, but my father was in the trombone section. I think that's probably why it was so. But in those moments when he would have those, when he would get a little upset with the band, he would just draw out this fear, and people would tremble, but with a good way and respect. But they tell me that by the time I had joined the band, he had mellowed a lot with age. But I also remember how he would break down and cry in the middle of practicing a piece because the Spirit would just move him, because of the words of the song or because the way the melody and harmony kind of interacted, whatever it was. And he would so many times would relate Jesus and biblical truth through music. And it touched my life, and I'm sure he touched many others as well. And Andy could do no wrong as far as I was concerned. He was a godly man, far above where I could ever be. And I would cling to every word he said and every move he made. In fact, one of the old pieces that we would play in band was a piece called Heroes of the Faith. And he was one of those for me. I actually had two others when I was growing up in that same corps that were those kinds of people to me. And I've had two officer mentor friends who I've looked up to as an adult, as an officer as well. And I'm sure that each of you have had someone like that in your life, a hero of the faith. And that's okay. They're good examples and influences on us. The Bible is full of that very thing. Heroes of the faith. That's why we preachers preach using these people as examples. We say, look at Abraham or Joseph or Moses or Noah, Hannah, Isaiah, John the Baptist, Peter, Paul. I mean, the list could go on. And the tendency that we have is to build these people up to this higher level of humanity. And at times even, we build them up to this level that it almost borders on divinity. Even Peter, whom we would put in that category of a hero, did the same thing. If you look in Luke chapter 9, it's the account of the transfiguration. Right? And here, you know the story. Jesus takes with him 3 of his closest disciples, and they go up together to the mountain to pray. And while they are there, 2 of these heroes of the faith appear and are talking with Jesus, Moses and Elijah. And when Peter sees them, these legends of Israel, he immediately says, well, let's build 3 tabernacles, one for each of them. Peter wanted to build a tabernacle for Jesus, and for Moses, and for Elijah. Of course, you know, a tabernacle is a place of worship. And in a sense, he was putting these prophets on the same level of Jesus as if they were to be worshiped. But when he said that, a cloud came and overshadowed the prophets, and all that Peter could see then was Jesus. And God got his message across quite plainly to the disciples about elevating any person to that kind of level. Heroes of the faith. They're good for us to learn from them, to follow their examples. But we're not to elevate them to this place that's equal to God or Jesus Christ. Right? Jesus is divine and man is not. And in essence, really, in truth, Jesus should be our only real hero of the faith. Moses, you think about it, Moses may have been a great leader, but he was just a man, right? Just a man. David was a great king, but he was just a man, flawed, right? Just like any of us. Samson was strong and mighty, but he was just a man. I think sometimes we forget that these heroes of the faith, this great people of God, they were only human. We see their lives and how wonderfully that they serve God, and so we elevate them and above to this special place, you know, far, far above where I could ever be. Now, I don't know, maybe we sometimes do that to excuse ourselves for our own lack of commitment or dedication or follow through for God, because after all, they were only human. Well, one of these great heroes of the faith was the great prophet Elijah. And we're going to be taking a closer look at Elijah over these next several weeks, taking a closer look at his life and what he went through. He was a mighty man of God, a mighty man of faith. I mean, I don't know if any person's prayers have ever brought the power of God into action quite like that of Elijah's. He was a lone figure standing against a world of sinful and rebellious people. He never backed down. And he stood in the power of God. And he took all comers on, right? You know, the Bible also tells us that he was one of only 2 people to never experience death. He went right to heaven. God sent his angels and took him right up to be with heaven, and he never died. So we think certainly he was someone special. Elijah is definitely the exception. He is truly a figure in God's history that's far, far above where you and I could ever be, right? Or is he? Or is he? See, that's not what the scripture tells us. If you look in James chapter 5, you know, the book of James was written to a very Jewish crowd, and Elijah was held in the highest place among the Jews, seconded only by Yahweh himself and equaled by Moses, the great deliverer. In fact, Elijah was looked on by some as the forerunner to the Messiah. Some even expected Elijah to be the Messiah. And some just held him in that high of esteem. Okay, most Jews, or maybe all the Jews, held him in that high place. They really had this hero of the faith syndrome when it came to Elijah. But James, in that 5th chapter, down that 17th verse, reminds them and us that Elijah was just a man. He was only human, and it uses these words, just like us. He was just like us. There was nothing special, nothing divine about Elijah. He was just a man. He was not given any special consideration or power that was only just for him. He was a man. He was flesh and blood, just like us. But what does that mean? Well, let's look at a few snapshots, a few pictures of his life, and I think we can learn from that. So our scripture reading was in the 19th chapter of 1 Kings. And here, his story comes in actually 1 Kings 18, chapter 18, chapter 19. And here you see a true picture of a man. In chapter 18, Elijah is on Mount Carmel making his formal stand against the prophets of Baal. They had been praying all day, but their God was nothing at all. But Elijah had confidence and faith in God. He stood firm and he prayed with unshakable fervor, and God answered his prayer. What a mighty day of victory it was for God and for his prophet. He had conquered the prophets of Baal. He put the wicked king Ahab in his place. What a stance that was. What a mighty man of God Elijah was. But then he returns to Jezreel, and he gets this message from the queen that she's going to kill him. Now, I'm not exactly sure what got into Elijah at this point, because this brave and mighty hero became afraid and ran away. Now, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to us, right? Coming from a man who had just called down fire from heaven. I mean, certainly, couldn't Elijah just have prayed for that fire once again to come down, maybe this time to consume the queen? I mean, I don't know. But he didn't do it. He panicked, and he was afraid, and he ran for his life. It doesn't really sound much like a hero, does it? But it certainly sounds like a regular human being, right? Just a man. He was only human. Is it so bad that Elijah was afraid? Is he a coward because he just couldn't muster the courage again to face another crisis? I don't think so. We've all been afraid before. Each of us has stood eye to eye with adversity and took off in the other direction. One of the most paralyzing problems in all of life is fear. And our fears can be directed in a lot of different areas, a lot of different places. Fear of the unknown, fear of calamity, fear of sickness or COVID or disease and death. Fear of losing our jobs. Fear of a terrorist attack, or fear of war, fear of being misunderstood or rejected or criticized or forgotten or mistreated. And often we become the victims of our fear instead of its conqueror. We can certainly understand Elijah's fear, can't we? Because we've been there, right? We've tasted fear before. We've felt that very same thing. You see, Elijah was a man just like us. But the very next picture that we see of Elijah is where he's in the desert. He had gone as far as he could, and he could go no farther. And he sat down underneath a tree and was ready to quit. Right? Listen to him. Listen to how he prayed. He said, "Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. I'm a failure. I did my best, and I can't do anymore. I'm tired, and I don't want to go on. I'm through. I'm through with it. And I don't even want to be alive anymore. I'm just tired. I'm tired. I'm tired." Where is the mighty hero now? Where is he at? He's down, right? He's way down. He's down in this pit, this dark place called depression. And it's so dark down there, he can't see a thing at all. There's not one glimmer of light that he can see. I don't know. Does it look familiar in any way? Sure it does, right? Because we've all been in a similar kind of situation before. We've all fought that battle of depression and despondency. Our feeling was that we just could go no farther. We've all been at that place where we're just tired, and we sat and we thought, this is it. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I'm done. Who hasn't struggled with those demoralizing seasons of dark times, of dark depression? And remember that this is right after an incredible mountaintop experience for Elijah, where he was used mightily of God. But that's often when the depression hits us, right? Because we can't remain on the mountaintop. That's not where life is lived out. And quite honestly, it's not unusual at all to have that wonderful mountaintop experience to be followed by this time of spiritual attack or sickness or depression. We could try to fight away the clouds of darkness, but they just continue to press on us. And we can begin to think, why, maybe you've even thought, why can't I just live on the mountaintop? Why can't we? Life is not lived on Mount Carmel. Life is not lived on the Mount of Transfiguration. You cannot stay on the mountaintop. Sooner or later, life will lead you down the slopes. And you have to deal with it. You have to live your life. I read an article of a minister who was called to visit a man who was in the pits. When he got the call, it led him to this tiny, dirty, garage-like apartment. And when he went in, he found a man sitting with a 12-gauge shotgun across his lap. And in the apartment, there were pictures of his son. It was just everywhere, and he couldn't see him anymore. He was divorced some years back, and then he had also lost his job because of a back injury, and he was just alone. The two of them spoke for quite some time, but the minister was unable to lift that man out of that pit of despondency. And within a week, he drove his car out into a forest and killed himself with a shotgun. And it's not something we like to talk about. It's certainly not something we like to admit. But that many of us have dealt with those same kinds of feelings of despair. Despair. Elijah does not sit alone under the broom tree. Because we've all been there in one way or another. Maybe not to that place. Maybe not to that extreme. But we've been there. We know that battle with despair. We can feel the same hurt and relate to him because he was human just like us. A little farther down in the chapter 19, we find Elijah at Mount Horeb sitting all alone in a dark, cold cave. And the Lord asks him what he's doing there. And Elijah's response rang out. He said, I'm all alone. I'm the only one left. Nobody cares. People just want to see me dead. So I just sit here all alone. Loneliness has been called one of the most universal sources of human suffering. And again, you know what that is because you've been there as well. You have felt that painful inner emptiness. Maybe it was just a short time for you. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones. Because for some people, this is an ongoing battle of feelings of isolation, of feelings of this intense desire to just want to belong, to belong to something somewhere. Sometimes we can even be surrounded by people and still feel unwanted and rejected or misunderstood. And the hurt that we feel inside, it's even greater than any physical pain that we have ever experienced. Again, I read the story of a lonely girl who was, in a very young age, was placed into a foster home because her parents didn't want her anymore. They just walked out of her life without giving any reason or clue to where they're going, and no word about ever coming back again. And she went from home to home, foster home to foster home, longing for the day when her parents would come back and just want her and would love her again and accept her, but they never did. Years passed, and she became a teenage rebel, lashing out the world in every way that she could. And she just felt alone. And all she wanted was to have her parents back with her again. And one day she decided to look for her parents, and amazingly enough, through a strange set of circumstances, she was actually able to find them. But it didn't take long for her to realize that she still was not wanted. Her parents allowed her to stay in their home for a little while, but the relationship was forced and awkward. And one morning they told her that they had plans. They wanted to start a new life, But that new life did not include her. And deep within her, she just wanted to be part of that family. Her only desire was to belong. But she knew that she was not wanted. And she reluctantly squeezed out the words, "I don't want to be in your way. Perhaps it would be best if I'm not around. Perhaps I should leave." To which her father responded, "Okay, I'll help you pack." They stuffed some clothes into a backpack, and he rolled up some blanket and put it on her backpack and folded up a $20 bill and put it in her pocket, shook her hand, gave her a hug, and said goodbye. And ever since that moment, this young girl had just lived out on the street. She became actually a bag lady, slept in alleys, ate from garbage cans, never able to find a place where she fit in. And this story was shared with a pastor over the phone in Los Angeles. She had called up and wanted to just share her story, to say, "This is who I am. When you see this person on the street, this is who I am." But she never left her name. She never left any place where anyone could reach out to her. And as far as we know, she still lives out on those streets, just longing to belong. And it's a sad story, but even sadder still is the fact that there is a world full of hurting, lonely people. And you may be one of them. But we all know what that's like, don't we? And so did Elijah. But the last picture that I want to show of Elijah is that of his faithfulness. Elijah was a man. He was human, just like any of us. Elijah faced some of the worst trials possible. He experienced some of the lowest emotions known to mankind. He was afraid. He was tired. He was depressed. He was lonely. But he never turned his back on God. He remained faithful. Sure, times were rough. And certainly he didn't understand everything that he faced and why. I'm sure he had a lot of unanswered questions. But his faith and obedience to God never faltered. He followed God's command. He did what he was told, went where he was shown, and relied on God to bring him through. And God did. Because God brought Elijah out of the desert. He brought him out of the cave. He brought him out of the pit. And he restored him. Elijah was a man just like us. He experienced the worst of what life could throw at him. He experienced the same hurts and doubts and feelings that you and I feel. He was a person just like us. But remember, Elijah was also faithful. It was through him, sometimes hurting, sometimes lonely, sometimes despairing, sometimes fearful, but always human. It was through him that God worked mighty miracles through, and through whom God's glorious power was made manifest. We know that Elijah was a man just like us. But the question is, if Elijah was a man just like us, if he was a person just like us, will we be faithful just like him? Will we allow God to work through us? Will we allow God to restore us when needed, to use us when needed, to shine through us, just like he did Elijah? He can do that through your life and through mine. All it takes is a little faith and a lot of faithfulness. We've got to stick with it, even in bad times. We've got to keep trusting and believing in God and his plans for us. We don't know what this year will hold. We can face a lot of tough things, a lot of tough times. If this future year it will be anything like the years past, we will face plenty of difficulties, but many good things too. Wonderful times, but there'll be tough times ahead of us as well. How will we be, even through the tough times? Will we be faithful? And you know, one of the wonderful things is as we are faithful, as we determine to be true through it all, then we can also join in the ranks of the heroes of the faith. And our example can be a light to someone else and to help them through as well. The chorus that I'd like us to sing is the one that just says, Jesus is all I need. Jesus is all that I need. So whatever comes ahead, whatever we're going to face in this year to come, it's not money that we need. It's not possessions that we need. It's not, somehow sucking it up so we can get through it. No, what we need is to stay close to Jesus, to walk with Jesus, to follow Jesus through everything. Our commitment to Jesus must be 100%. Jesus is all that I need. Do you know this chorus? It's not a new one in any way, but maybe it's one you haven't really sung much before. Jesus is all that I need. Jesus is all I need. Jesus is all I need. I'll follow where he leads. 'Cause Jesus is all I need. Very simple, right? Beautiful chorus, beautiful words of commitment as we look ahead into this new year, as we step off into this year of the unknown. We can say with confidence that Jesus is all that I need. Amen? Let's sing it again, and then the worship band will come and lead us in our closing song. Jesus is all I need. Jesus is all I need. I'll follow where he leads. Amen? Because Jesus is all I need.
As we get ready to sing, stand up for Jesus.